Hi class, this is going to be a quick video covering some of the things we discussed in class both Thursdays so far. Some of it's going to be reviewing, inserting CAD files into a workspace, and some are going to be drafting tools that we had gone over, such as filled regions and lines. So the first item is importing CAD files. So just a reminder, if we go up into the tabs up here, if we click on Insert, Import CAD, and then you locate the file that you want to import. And then before we click Open, some additional options that make importing easier. Black and white, so that what we're working with is clean, and removing all the colors from the CAD layers that are in the file that you're importing. Sometimes you want to check this, correct lines that are slightly off axis, as it can mess up some of the line work. It should be fine for this assignment. And then as far as the positioning and place at, this will make it easier for you to place um, based off where you want it. So if you do manual origin, manual center, those are typically the options I prefer, um, unless you know that your CAD file is already positioned in the right location. You can just auto origin to internal origin and it will place it exactly where you want it to be. But most of the time, because we're starting a new file, you're going to want to do manual origin, manual center. So once you have the options checked, you're going to be able to click open. On a side note, if you just want to import CAD that's only visible in the current view, just a reminder, the views are in your project browser. They can either be located on the side here or down below, depending on the layout that you prefer for Revit. But if you just want to have it in the current view only, if you check this, it will only be applied to the view that you're working in. And if you go into any other views or your 3D view, you will not see that. So I'm just going to kind of show this real quick. So if I hit open and I place the file, because I placed it in the current view only, if I go to 3D views, you'll see that there's nothing in the workspace. So if I redo that and say, and I choose to have it visible in all views, and I place it here. So now if I go to my 3D view, because I unchecked that option, you can see that is now visible in all of the views. Okay. So now that we have imported this CAD file, good practice or standards, we can you go up to the Modify tab. If you click on the CAD file that you placed and then click this Move tool or shortcut key MV, you can click it and then click on the corner. And good practice is to always start the corner of your building at the corner or intersection of the origin of the project. And this way, whenever you load in a reference model or anything like that, everything will be coordinated from the same point. Once you have the CAD file located into the area that you want it to be, you can click on it again, and I recommend once you have it clicked, the modify tool should come up. I recommend pinning it, and what this does is this doesn't allow you to move it again. So if I'm clicking and trying to move it won't let you do it. Um, if you do want to move it again, though, you can uncheck the pin, and then uh, you can move it again. But it's just and you can pin and unpin it again once you have done that. This is good practice, though, just in case you accidentally shift or move it. Sometimes that will happen with like structural models, which then results in your models being uncoordinated. So now that we have our background inserted into the workspace, some of the things or tools that we can use to start drafting a design for the hardscape and landscape features. Um, we're going to want to go to the annotate tool. Um, one thing to note about the annotate tool, so all of these options that are up here, detail line, region, filled region, and detail components, which we'll get into further down the road. For now, I want to focus on just using detail lines and regions. But uh, one thing to note about these components is when you are drawing in a view with detail components, these are 2D only, which means that they're only going to be showing up in the view that you're working in. So similar to uh, when we inserted the CAD file, checking that box as visible in current view only, this is the same thing as detail items or detail lines. So if I go to the 3D region view, you can see those red lines that I just drew aren't visible in the overall workspace, and they're only applicable to the current working view. So detail lines, one thing to note is there's a bunch of different options um, when you have a line selected, so or a detail line tool selected. So if you go over to the modify tab, you have the option to draw rectangles, you have the option to draw circles, you have polygon tools. So don't forget about the green bar that comes up here. For a lot of the different tools that you use, you can always change the parameters. So if I want an octagon, you can just put 8 sides, the radius. These are all just definitely important tools that will help um, make drafting easier down the road. Um, some other things to note in the line tool, there's a thing that says line style. So I don't know if you saw, like, my lines that I'm drawing are dashed in red, and that's because there's a specific line style that I'm using, which is called construction. Uh, in the template that you guys load in from Revit, there's probably not all of these options available up front. Um, we can go over how to draw some of these in the future, but in this template that or Revit file that I'm going to share with you all, I'm going to have a couple of these lines loaded into that file so that you'll be able to just copy and paste them into your file, and it'll automatically allow you to choose as an option down the road. So again, what these line styles are, um, they are essentially just different visibilities of what the lines can be, and also thicknesses. So this is how BWH organizes our lines and what our standards are. So the higher the number goes, the higher or the thicker the line weight is. Um, so if I draw this, they all are appearing the same right now. So there's the little tool called thin lines all the way up at the top. And if you check that or uncheck it, you will be able to see that there's the thickness of the lines graphically shows now. Um, I personally like to draft in thin lines, and then before I print or before I'm done working in a view, I'll uncheck it to make sure that visibly it's appearing the way I want it to. But the benefit of having thin lines is to make sure that you're dimensioning to the right things. So kind of similar. So our wall assembly has a lot of different layers, but you can dimension to each part of these. So working in thin lines makes it easier to see those layers. But if I turn them off, you can see that they start to get blunt, or they start to blend together. So being able to dimension to them with thin lines turned off can be a little more difficult. So just a nice tool to know about if you're trying to be more precise, have thin lines turned on. Um, so that's detail lines. We're gonna go into regions now. Um, so I'm gonna click on regions. So similar to detail lines, the perimeter is similar to detail lines, where you can select the boundary that you want to create, and like the thickness of the line, things like that. And then you can again use different array of drawing tools to create rectangles, circles, etc. One thing to note, when you're in the filled region tool, or when you're using the filled region tool, once you click filled region, if you like try to click out or anything like that, it's because we're still in the uh, in a phase where we're trying to draw a region, and Revit won't let you do anything else until you either accept the region you created or cancel out, which will delete all the lines that you just drew. So one thing to note about filled regions, if there's a gap in your or an unclosed loop, you won't be able to leave this interface, and it'll come up with an error just saying lines must be closed, and it'll try and highlight the locations where you have a discontinuation of lines. So that's something important to note about. Like if you're going through and like tracing all the way around here, and you're getting towards the end, and then you try and press check, and it's saying there's not a closed loop somewhere. Sometimes this happens, and then you kind of have to spend some additional time trying to find where the closed loops are, or where the opens are. So once you're satisfied with the region, so I'm just gonna show like a 5 foot wide sidewalk leading to this door here. So I'm going to draw a singular line, and then I'm going to draw 5 feet over and close that loop. And so I just want to center in on this door. So I'm going to just move it 2.5 feet over so that it's centered on the door, and I'm satisfied with this configuration here, and I'm gonna just press check, and you're gonna see that this region is now created. It's a mask. There's a parameter that's making it mask, so if you draw this over, you can see the dotted lines disappear behind it. I'm going to go over what masking is and how to turn that on or off if you want your region to not overlay things in that case. Um, so, uh, one thing about filled regions is you can create a bunch of different ones, and there's a lot of different options. These are all preloaded into my office's template, but I'm going to create a couple for our site plan exercise. Um, but you can see when I click on the region, if you go under properties, there's a bunch of different options like the earth, um, and then horizontal lines, etc. So you can play around with these and choose specific ones. For this exercise, again, I'm going to create a couple that are going to be pretty standard for a site plan, that you'll be able to just copy and paste from the file I upload into your Revit file. So uh, getting into the different regions. So if I go to edit type um, over here, so sorry, I did that real quickly. So under the properties tab and whatever region you have selected, there's a option called edit type. It's going to bring up this properties menu, and there's a lot of different items in here that we can play around with. The masking region is one of them. So currently, if I am looking at this region in this plan, it's masking or overlaying the dashed line that is visible. But if I want it to be transparent, you can just simply click that masking uh, parameter, press OK, and now you can see that it no longer overlaps the lines, but is now transparent rather. And so you can also see the door swings. It's not conflicting with that. Um, for the site exercises, it's probably beneficial to keep the masking off. Um, that way, it's not going to hide any of the site components that are already in the model. If we go back into the edit type, um, there's some things that we can do to duplicate the patterns. Um, so if I have two of these regions, there's one thing to note that if you are clicking on if your regions are sharing properties, so if if you have multiple regions that are horizontal lines to 1/16, if you make an edit to the region of one, it's going to edit both. But if you change it to sand dense and you then edit the properties of the horizontal lines, this is going to remain separate. So the way it's reading is each region is or each property is its individual instance of like a family. So if you change properties for solid black, it's going to change all of the solid black regions that you have in your model. So it's very important to be aware of this, that if if you want to edit a region but not affect all the others that were created, you're going to want to hit this duplicate button. And then you're going to want to rename it as a separate instance. So if I want to make this red with horizontal lines, you can. I suggest labeling it specifically what the region is. I'm going to hit OK, and then I can change the colors to red. And then now that that's done, you can see that change that property. So if I'm going through my regions now, you can now see the red region is now added to the library of selections. But you also have the original one that I created. So now I have a red region, and now and also a black line. So there's a lot of online. There's a lot of like complex patterns that you can load into the fill patterns for these regions. Revit comes with some standard patterns. Um, there's also ways that you can custom make your own, but it's a very complex process, and uh, typically we try to avoid it, as it definitely is a difficult process that requires actually a third party or third program to create. But I'm gonna go over like how to maybe make like a 5 foot by 5 foot grid for a sidewalk. Um, so I'm going to just go back and create a 5-foot region again. And we're gonna center this on the door. So I'm gonna hit edit type again. I'm gonna duplicate. I'm gonna just call this sidewalk. All right, and now that that's done, and I go into the foreground fill pattern, you're gonna see this drop down menu of all the different regions again. One thing to note, there's a pattern type and there's two options. It's drafting and model. Drafting is an instance where you're going to your regions are going to scale based on the viewport that you're working in. So your diagonal lines are always going to be spaced a X amount of distance when you print it out. If you do it in a model pattern type, your patterns will be adjusted per the scale of the view that you're working in. And for this instance, we want to be creating a model pattern because we want a accurate representation of the score lines of the concrete. So we're going to be creating like a 5-foot by 5-foot grid, and we don't want that grid to be changing. So I'm going to do like a quick demonstration of what that really is referring to. Again, this is important. So you're going to want to duplicate your pattern type so that in case you have a other region that's using the name or pattern, you don't want it to affect the other regions that are using this. So I'm duplicating. I'm going to call it sidewalk. We're using a orthogonal crosshatch pattern because I want the sidewalk to be a 5-foot by 5-foot grid. We're going to type in 5 feet. You can change the angle if you want. So like if I do a 45, you can see it rotates at 45 degrees to be in an angle. But for now, we're just going to do orthogonal 5-foot by 5-foot grid. So you can see it was created, model, okay. And we're going to turn off masking and we're going to say, okay. So now you see the line patterns was created. And because of we checked or we used a model pattern rather than a drafting pattern, these lines within this region are able to be modified or moved. So I'm going to align using this tool, the line tool, or typing AL. So if you click on that, you click on the line you want something to be aligned to, and then you can click the line and it's going to move it like that. So now you can see we got a nice 5-foot wide sidewalk, and you start the pattern from there so that if we take a dimension tool, so annotate aligned at the corner there, we can dimension to the sidewalks. Similar to everything else, everything is going to have different properties depending on what family you're working with. That's how Revit is. So if we want to show feet, just make sure that whatever dimension style you're selecting, it's going to be in feet.